In the annals of crime, few acts shock the conscience like a mother taking the life of her own child. These cases leave communities reeling, spark fierce debates, and raise haunting questions about motive, mental illness, and justice. In this video, we explore 6 of the most brutal cases of women currently or formerly incarcerated for killing their own children. These stories are not just about crime. They're about tragedy, loss, and the complex human stories behind the headlines. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on our deep dives into history's most gripping true crime stories. Now, let's step into the first case. Case 1, Diane Downs. Diane Elizabeth Downs, now 70 years old, was convicted in 1984 and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years for the murder of her daughter and the attempted murder of her 2 other children. She's been incarcerated for over 40 years, currently at the Central California Women's Facility. It was May 19, 1983, on a quiet back road near Springfield, Oregon. Diane, a 27-year-old divorced postal worker, drove her red Nissan Pulsar with her 3 children, Cheryl, 7, Christy, 8, and Danny, 3, strapped into their seats. Diane had been struggling. Her marriage had ended, and she was obsessed with a married man, Lou Lewiston, who made it clear he didn't want children in his life. This rejection festered, driving Diane to a chilling decision. That night, Diane stopped the car, claiming later that a bushy-haired stranger flagged her down. But the truth was far darker. She aimed her pistol at her children, firing multiple shots. Cheryl, the youngest, was struck twice and died instantly, her small body slumped in the back seat. Christy was shot in the chest and arm, collapsing in agony. Danny, just 3, was shot in the back, the bullet severing his spinal cord, leaving him paralyzed. Diane then turned the gun on herself, grazing her arm to stage the attack. She drove to McKenzie-Willamette Hospital, claiming a stranger had attacked them. Doctors worked frantically, but Cheryl was pronounced dead on arrival. Christy and Danny clung to life, their injuries catastrophic. Diane's calm demeanor raised suspicions. She seemed more concerned about her own minor wound than her children's fates. Diane stuck to her story of the stranger, but cracks appeared quickly. She gave conflicting accounts, and her behavior, smiling during interviews and flirting with hospital staff, struck investigators as odd. Meanwhile, police searched her home and found her diaries, revealing her obsession with Lewiston and his rejection of her children as a motive. The pivotal moment came when Christy, recovering in the hospital, bravely testified that there was no stranger, her mother had shot them. Forensic evidence sealed Diane's fate. Ballistics matched the .22 caliber casings to a gun found in her possession, and blood spatter in the car contradicted her story. On February 28, 1984, 9 months after the shootings, Diane was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. The trial, held in June 1984, was a media spectacle later depicted in the TV movie Small Sacrifices. The prosecution painted Diane as a cold, calculated killer driven by her desire to eliminate her children for a man. The defense argued she was mentally unstable, but the jury didn't buy it. After 6 hours of deliberation, she was found guilty on all counts. Sentenced to life plus 50 years, Diane has been denied parole multiple times, with her next hearing in 2027. She maintains her innocence, claiming the stranger's story to this day. Diane has never been on death row, as Oregon did not pursue the death penalty in her case. In prison, she's been a model inmate at times, but also faced controversy. In 1987, she escaped from the Oregon Women's Correctional Center for 10 days, fleeing to reconnect with a former lover. Recaptured, she faced additional time. She's been transferred multiple times due to safety concerns, given the notoriety of her crime. Diane had a troubled past, marked by allegations of childhood abuse by her father, though never substantiated. She had no prior convictions, but was known for erratic behavior, including multiple relationships and a fixation on independence. Mental health experts noted narcissistic traits, but no formal diagnosis was used in her defense. Diane's case sparked debates about maternal filicide and mental health. Her calm demeanor and lack of remorse fueled public outrage, making her a symbol of evil motherhood. Some argue her sentence was too harsh, given potential psychological factors, but her escape and continued denials have dampened sympathy. The case shocked Springfield and led to tightened child welfare protocols. It also inspired and rules book Small Sacrifices and a TV movie, cementing Diane's infamy. The community built a memorial at John D. Long Lake, where another tragedy would later unfold. Case 2. Susan Smith. Susan Lee Smith, now 54 years old, was convicted in 1995 and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole for the murders of her 2 sons. She's been incarcerated for 30 years at Leith Correctional Institution in South Carolina, where her first parole hearing was denied in November 2024. On October 25, 1994, in Union, South Carolina, Susan Smith, a 23-year-old single mother, buckled her sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander, into their car seats in her 1990 Mazda Protege. Susan was unraveling. Her marriage to David Smith had collapsed, and she was entangled in an affair with Tom Finley, a wealthy local man who, in a letter days earlier, had ended their relationship, stating he wasn't ready for children. That evening, Susan drove to John D. Long Lake, a secluded spot. Her mind was in turmoil, torn between despair and a desperate desire to win Finley back. She pulled up to the lake's boat ramp, exited the car, and released the parking brake. The Mazda rolled into the water, sinking with her boys strapped inside. Michael and Alexander drowned, trapped in their seats, as the car filled with water. Susan stood on the shore, watching it disappear, then ran to a nearby house, screaming that a black man had carjacked her car with her sons inside. For 9 days, Susan played the grieving mother, appearing on national television with tearful pleas for her son's return. The nation rallied, and a massive search ensued. But her story unraveled. Detectives noted inconsistencies. She claimed the carjacker forced her out at a traffic light, but her timeline didn't add up. On November 3, 1994, under pressure during an interrogation, Susan confessed there was no carjacker. She had drowned her sons to remove obstacles to her relationship with Finley. Divers recovered the car from the lake, finding the boys' bodies still in their seats. Susan was arrested that day, charged with 2 counts of murder. The trial began in July 1995 and gripped the nation. Prosecutors argued Susan killed her sons to pursue a new life with Finley, pointing to his letter as motive. Her defense, led by David Bruck and Judy Clark, claimed she was suicidal and intended to die with her sons, but instinctively left the car. Expert witnesses testified to her severe depression, exacerbated by her father's suicide when she was 6 and her own suicide attempt at 13. The jury deliberated for just 2.5 hours, convicting her of 2 counts of murder. They spared her the death penalty, sentencing her to life with parole eligibility after 30 years. Her 2024 parole hearing was denied after she reportedly threw a tantrum in her cell, and her next hearing is in 2026. Susan has faced scrutiny in prison, including disciplinary actions for sexual relationships with guards in 2000 and 2001. She's been described as a troubled inmate, struggling with the weight of her infamy. She remains in protective custody due to threats from other prisoners. Susan grew up in a turbulent home, marked by her father's suicide and her stepfather's alleged abuse. She had no prior convictions, but a history of depression and suicidal ideation. Her mental health was a cornerstone of her defense, though not enough to sway the jury. The case ignited racial tensions due to Susan's false claim of a black carjacker, fueling debates about prejudice in crime reporting. Her mental health defense sparked discussions about postpartum depression and filicide, though many viewed her actions as calculated. Union, South Carolina, was devastated, and a memorial at John D. Long Lake became a pilgrimage site. Tragically, 2 children later drowned there when their car rolled into the lake, mimicking Susan's crime. Her case heightened awareness of maternal filicide and mental health, though public sympathy remains limited. Case 3. Andrea Yates. Andrea Pia Yates, now 61 years old, was convicted in 2002 and sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years for the murders of her 5 children. She's been incarcerated for over 23 years at the Mountain View Unit in Texas, no longer on death row after a successful appeal. On June 20, 2001, In Houston, Texas, Andrea Yates, a 36-year-old homeschooling mother, carried out one of the most devastating acts of filicide in modern history. Andrea and her husband, Rusty, were devout Christians, influenced by a fundamentalist preacher who emphasized strict parenting. Andrea suffered from severe postpartum depression and psychosis, exacerbated by 5 pregnancies in 7 years. She had attempted suicide twice, been hospitalized, and was prescribed antipsychotics, but Rusty and her doctors underestimated the depth of her mental illness. That morning, Rusty left for work, leaving Andrea alone with the children, despite warnings from her psychiatrist not to leave her unsupervised. Andrea's mind, fractured by psychosis, convinced her that her children were doomed to eternal damnation unless she saved them. After breakfast, she filled the family bathtub with water. One by one, she called her children to the bathroom. Starting with Paul, then Luke, and John, she held each boy under the water, their small bodies struggling briefly before going limp. She laid their bodies on her bed, covering them with a sheet. 6-month-old Mary was next, drowned in the same tub. Noah, the eldest, walked in and saw his sister in the water. He tried to run, but Andrea chased him, dragged him back, and drowned him too. She called 911, her voice flat, saying, "I just killed my kids." Then she called Rusty, repeating the same words. Police arrived to find Andrea calm, almost robotic, and the 5 children dead on the bed, their bodies still wet. Andrea made no attempt to flee. When police arrived, she confessed immediately, explaining she believed she was saving her children from Satan. Officers noted her eerie detachment, a hallmark of her psychotic state. She was arrested on June 20th, 2001, charged with capital murder for the deaths of 3 of her children, Noah, John, and Mary, as Texas law allowed prosecutors to focus on those counts to secure a death penalty. The trial, starting in February 2002, was a national spectacle. Prosecutors argued Andrea knew right from wrong, pointing to her methodical actions and 911 call. The defense countered that her psychosis rendered her legally insane, supported by testimony from her psychiatrist, who revealed she'd been taken off antipsychotics weeks before the murders. A key controversy arose when a prosecution expert falsely claimed Andrea was inspired by a Law and Order episode that never existed, tainting the trial. The jury convicted her of capital murder, sentencing her to life with a chance of parole in 2041. In 2005, her conviction was overturned due to the false testimony. A 2006 retrial found her not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was committed to a psychiatric facility, where she remains. Andrea was briefly on death row in 2002, but has since lived in psychiatric units, including Kerrville State Hospital and now Mountain View Unit. She receives ongoing treatment for schizophrenia and depression, reportedly expressing deep remorse. She refuses parole hearings, believing she deserves punishment. Andrea had no prior convictions, but a long history of mental illness, including postpartum psychosis after her 4th child. She was a high-achieving nurse before marriage, but became isolated under Rusty's strict household and religious beliefs. Her mental health deteriorated with each pregnancy, ignored by those around her. The case sparked national debates on postpartum psychosis, mental health stigma, and the insanity defense. Critics argued Rusty and Andrea's church shared blame for ignoring her illness. Advocates for mental health reform used her case to push for better maternal care. Public opinion remains divided. Some see her as a monster, others as a victim of untreated illness. Houston was shaken, and the case led to increased awareness of postpartum disorders. Texas passed the Andrea Yates bill, mandating mental health screenings for new mothers. Her story inspired documentaries and books, like Are You There Alone? By Suzanne O'Malley. Case 4, Lisa Montgomery. Lisa Marie Montgomery, executed at age 52, was convicted in 2005 and sentenced to death for the murder of Bobby Joe Stinnett and the kidnapping of her unborn child. She spent 16 years on federal death row at the Federal Medical Center in Texas before her execution on January 13, 2021. On December 16, 2004, in Skidmore, Missouri, Lisa Montgomery, a 36-year-old mother of 4, drove 170 miles from Melbourne, Kansas, to the home of Bobby Joe Stinnett, a 23-year-old pregnant woman 8 months along. Lisa, who had faked pregnancies to gain attention, was desperate to present a newborn to her husband, Kevin, to maintain her facade. She'd met Bobby Joe online in a dog breeding chat room, where Bobby Joe advertised her rat terriers. Bobby Joe welcomed Lisa inside to discuss a puppy purchase. Once alone, Lisa attacked. She strangled Bobby Joe with a white nylon cord, tightening it until she collapsed. Bobby Joe, still alive, fought back weakly as Lisa pulled out a kitchen knife. In a brutal act, Lisa cut open Bobby Joe's abdomen, severing her unborn daughter from her womb. Bobby Joe died from blood loss and strangulation. Lisa wrapped the baby, named Victoria Joe, in a blanket, cleaned her up, and fled the scene. Lisa drove home to Kansas, presenting Victoria Joe to her husband as their newborn. She paraded the baby around town, claiming she'd given birth. Meanwhile, Bobby Joe's mother found her daughter's body and alerted police. Investigators traced Lisa's online alias, Darlene Fisher, through IP addresses and chat logs. Within 24 hours, on December 17, 2004, police arrested Lisa at her home, recovering Victoria Joe unharmed and reuniting her with her father. The trial began in October 2007 in Kansas City. Prosecutors presented DNA evidence linking Lisa to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and Bobby Joe's blood on Lisa's clothes. The defense argued Lisa suffered from pseudocyesis, false pregnancy, and severe mental illness, including PTSD from childhood abuse and multiple rapes. The jury rejected the insanity defense, convicting her of kidnapping resulting in death, a federal capital offense. She was sentenced to death in 2008. Appeals focused on her mental health and claims of ineffective counsel, but all were denied. Her execution in 2021, the first federal execution of a woman in 67 years, sparked controversy over her mental state and the rushed execution schedule under the Trump administration. Lisa spent her years on death row in isolation, battling depression and anxiety. She received therapy but showed little remorse, maintaining her actions were driven by delusion. Her execution by lethal injection was carried out despite clemency pleas from mental health advocates. Lisa had no prior convictions, but a traumatic upbringing marked by physical and sexual abuse by her stepfather and others. She had 4 children from 2 marriages and a history of faking pregnancies to manipulate relationships. Experts diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder and pseudocyesis. The case reignited debates over the death penalty for mentally ill defendants. Advocates argued Lisa's execution ignored her trauma and mental health, while others saw her crimes premeditation as justifying the sentence. Her case drew international attention, with UN experts calling for a stay of execution. Skidmore, a small town already scarred by unsolved crimes, was devastated. Victoria Joe's survival was a rare light in the tragedy, and her story inspired tighter online safety regulations. The case remains a stark example of how mental illness and desperation can lead to unimaginable violence. Case 5. Megan Huntsman. Megan Marie Huntsman, now 50 years old, was convicted in 2015 and sentenced to 6 life terms, 5 of them consecutive, for the murders of her 6 newborn infants. She's been incarcerated for 10 years at the Utah State Correctional Facility, with no possibility of parole. Between 1996 and 2006, in Pleasant Grove, Utah, Megan Huntsman, a 21 to 31-year-old mother, hid a horrific secret in her family's garage. Megan, married to Darren West, was struggling with methamphetamine addiction and an unstable marriage. Over a decade, she gave birth to 7 infants in secret, but only 1 survived. The other 6, 5 boys and 1 girl, met a grim fate. Each time, Megan delivered alone in her home, concealing her pregnancies from her husband, family, and neighbors. After giving birth, she smothered or strangled each newborn, wrapping their tiny bodies in plastic bags or towels. She hid them in cardboard boxes, stashing them in the garage among clutter. The first killing occurred in 1996, after her first child was born. She later claimed she was overwhelmed, addicted, and unable to care for more children. Each subsequent birth followed the same pattern: deliver, kill, hide. The infants, all full-term, were never given a chance to live. Her surviving daughter, born in 2006, was raised normally, unaware of her siblings' fates. Megan's secret held for years. She moved out in 2011 after separating from Darren, leaving the boxes behind. On April 12, 2014, Darren, cleaning the garage, opened a box and found a tiny, mummified body. Horrified, he called police, who uncovered 5 more infant corpses, some so decomposed they required DNA testing to confirm their identities. Megan lived a seemingly normal life for years, raising her surviving daughter and working odd jobs despite her addiction. After the bodies were discovered, police traced them to Megan through DNA evidence. On April 13, 2014, she was arrested at her new home in West Valley City. During questioning, she confessed to killing 6 infants, claiming she was too addicted to care for them and feared judgment. A 7th infant, found stillborn, was not included in the murder charges. In February 2015, Megan pleaded guilty to 6 counts of first-degree murder, avoiding a trial. Prosecutors presented DNA evidence confirming the infants were hers and Darren's, along with forensic analysis showing smothering or strangulation as the cause of death. The defense cited her addiction and depression but didn't pursue an insanity defense. She was sentenced to 6 life terms, with the judge noting the unimaginable cruelty of her actions. No appeals have been filed, and Megan has remained silent since her conviction. Megan is housed in a medium security unit, largely isolated due to the nature of her crimes. She's reportedly struggled with depression and has limited contact with family. Prison records show no major disciplinary issues, but she remains a target of hostility from other inmates. Megan had no prior convictions, but a history of drug addiction starting in her teens. Raised in a working-class Utah family, she showed no outward signs of mental illness beyond addiction-related behavior. Her marriage to Darren was turbulent, marked by financial strain and domestic issues, though he claimed ignorance of her pregnancies. The case stunned Pleasant Grove, raising questions about how Megan hid her pregnancies for a decade. Critics questioned whether social services could have intervened, given her addiction. The lack of an insanity defense sparked debate about addiction's role in criminal responsibility. Some viewed her plea deal as lenient, given the scale of her crimes. The discovery shocked Utah, leading to community vigils for the unnamed infants. It prompted stricter monitoring of at-risk families by Utah's child welfare system. The case remains a chilling example of hidden filicide, with media dubbing Megan the garage killer. From a decade of hidden horrors, we turn to a case that unfolded in a single, brutal night. Case 6, Darlie Routier. Darlie Lynn Routier, now 55 years old, was convicted in 1997 and sentenced to death for the murder of her 5-year-old son, Damon, and remains a suspect in the death of her 6-year-old son, Devin. She's been on death row for 28 years at the Mountain View unit in Texas, awaiting execution. On June 6, 1996, in Rowlett, Texas, Darlie Routier, a 26-year-old mother, lived a seemingly idyllic life with her husband, Darren, and their 3 sons, Devin, 6, Damon, 5, and Drake, 7 months. Behind the facade, the family faced financial strain, and Darlie struggled with postpartum depression after Drake's birth. That night, Darlie and her 2 older boys slept downstairs in the living room, watching TV, while Darren and Drake slept upstairs. Around 2:30 a.m., Darlie claimed she woke to an intruder standing over her. She screamed, and the man fled through the kitchen, dropping a bloody knife. Devin and Damon were stabbed multiple times with a butcher knife from the kitchen. Devin died instantly, his chest pierced. Damon, still alive, had deep wounds to his back and chest. Darlie herself had a slashed throat and arm wounds, later deemed superficial by experts. She called 911, screaming hysterically, as Darren rushed downstairs. Police arrived to find Devin dead and Damon barely alive. He died before paramedics could save him. Darlie's story of an intruder unraveled quickly. The crime scene suggested staging. A cut window screen was sliced from the inside, and no blood trailed outside. Her wounds appeared self-inflicted, and her behavior, joking at a memorial for her son's days later, raised suspicions. Darlie maintained her intruder story, appearing on TV to plead for justice. But inconsistencies piled up. A silly string video from Devin's birthday memorial, where Darlie laughed, and sprayed the grave, shocked investigators and the public. Blood evidence showed her moving around the house post-attack, contradicting her account. On June 18, 1996, 12 days after the murders, Darlie was arrested for Damon's murder, with Devon's death not charged to avoid double jeopardy if appeals succeeded. The trial began in January 1997 in Kerrville, Texas. Prosecutors presented forensic evidence. Blood spatter showed Darlie staged the scene, and the knife matched her kitchen set. Fibers from the cut screen were found on the knife, suggesting she cut it herself. The defense argued an unknown intruder was responsible, citing unidentified fingerprints, but the jury convicted her of capital murder for Damon's death. She was sentenced to death on February 4, 1997. Appeals, including claims of suppressed evidence and ineffective counsel, have been denied, but DNA testing in 2023 on the fingerprints remains ongoing, fueling her supporters' claims of innocence. Darlie remains on death row, maintaining her innocence through letters and interviews. She's active in prison ministries and has a small but vocal supporter base advocating for her release. Her health has declined, and she faces constant threats due to her case's notoriety. Darlie had no prior convictions, but grew up in a turbulent home with a controlling mother. She was a devoted mother outwardly, but struggled with debt and depression. No formal mental health diagnosis was presented at trial, though supporters cite postpartum depression. Darlie's case divides opinion. Supporters, including her family, insist she's innocent, pointing to untested DNA and prosecutorial misconduct. Critics argue her behavior and forensic evidence confirm her guilt. This silly string video remains a flashpoint, with some seeing it as grief, others as callousness. Her case has inspired documentaries and podcasts, keeping the debate alive. Rowlett was shaken, and the case heightened fears of home invasions. It also sparked discussions on postpartum depression and the reliability of forensic evidence. Darlie's ongoing appeals keep her case in the public eye, a symbol of contested justice. 6 women, 6 unimaginable tragedies. From Diane Downs' cold calculation to Darlie Routier's contested conviction, these cases challenge our understanding of motherhood, mental illness, and justice. What drives a mother to kill her own child? Is it desperation, delusion, or something darker? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss what these stories reveal about human nature and the pursuit of justice. If this series moved you, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join our community for more true crime deep dives.